Hello, and welcome to the 100th episode of the World War II podcast. I'm Angus Wallace. I have a special episode for you. This is being released on the 15th of September 2019, and not only is that the date Hitler had penciled for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, it's also my wedding anniversary. But pertinent to this episode, 75 years ago, the men of the 1st Airborne Army were making their preparations to undertake Operation Market Garden, the thrust into Holland with the aim of seizing a Rhine crossing. But it's not just the anniversary that makes this episode special. I'm joined by Gene Metcalfe. As a young man, Gene jumped into Holland with the 82nd, where he would be wounded at Nijmegen. And he tells his story in the book, Left for Dead at Nijmegen. But before we get to that, I'd like to say a thank you to all those people who have supported the podcast by subscribing, joining in the conversation on Facebook, and shooting me emails from time to time. After 100 episodes, I'm as enthusiastic as when I started. But I have other news. As some of you know, after starting the podcast, I returned to university and have studied for a master's degree, which I've now completed. But in the process of interviewing people for the show, I was encouraged by a number of them to think about applying to do a PhD. The result is I've won a scholarship to undertake a PhD at Leeds University. Oddly, considering the title of this podcast, my field of study isn't World War II, it's First World War recruitment. So there you are. I thought I would bring you all up to date with the journey the podcast started me on 4 years ago. Let's get to Gene's story. Gene, thank you for joining me. Shall we kick off? I wonder if we should start with why you joined the Airbourne. What enthused you to volunteer to become a paratrooper?
I always like to get things done right now. I didn't want to wait to do things, so slow. The Airborne was the quickest way to get in and get out, one way or the other. The Airborne was an elite, supposed to be an elite outfit, and of course I was a high school kid. I dropped out of high school, and I was fascinated by parachuting was fairly new in those days. And I thought, boy, they had nice posters and looked like a lot of fun, and I was hoping I could, hang in there. And I was worried, because I dropped out of school. I was worried about the IQ with that outfit, and I found out a couple of weeks that the IQ didn't matter, only unless it was lower the better.
Perhaps that's to do with how new modern parachuting would have been. I mean, it can't have been about that long to sort of want to hurl yourself out of an aeroplane attached to a parachute. They might not have wanted people to think about it too much.
Yeah, everything was new. That's just the way. I guess that's just the way we accept it as being. Well, that's the way it is. Like I say, lower the better.
Were you keen on any particular unit to join, or were you just happy to be in the 82nd?
I joined the 508, when I left civilian life, but I got sidetracked. I got transferred to another unit. So on the way down, I had to take my basic and everything. So, I mean, there's nothing, I didn't have any say about it, but I eventually did wind up in the outfit I joined up for. But that's when we wound up in the 82nd. Now, the first one was a 501, and that was attached to the 101st. And that was in Toccoa, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And the 508 was training down in Florida. And but they took me off of Fort Benning and transferred me to Georgia instead of Florida. That's how, it didn't matter to me as long as they fed me.
And how did you find basic training? Did army life suit you?
Well, I was in such good physical shape, but it was a lot of running, a lot of climbing, a lot of push-ups. Of course, I was on the top of the list of the non-coms about doing push-ups because I'd always seem to aggravate them, They had no sense of humor. So the training is, I think I did twice as much training as anybody else because I think I did twice as many push-ups. But I think it helped me out in the long run, Yeah.
At one point during basic training, you're almost thrown out for insubordination.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What did you do there?
Well, the insubordination, there was a guy there, was just all new guys there, and I usually didn't go. This was on a Sunday afternoon, and I wanted to wash out my fatigues, my jump clothes, So I was in the laundry room scrubbing them out on the floor with a brush, and this was a guy called Big Stoop. He was just promoted to a corporal, and it went to his head. He thought he was God himself, Anyway, I was the only guy around because everybody else had been in town. I was there just doing my laundry. And folks just found me, and it was about 2 o'clock a Sunday afternoon. He says, "Come on down to the orderly room, report right now." I said, "Well, as soon as I wash out the soap out of my jump clothes, So I washed them out, and then I went on down. And they said, "Where the hell you been?" And I told them where I've been. I told them what I did. And he said, "Well, that's insubordination. This is we're still fighting the Civil War. Some of these people, and we Northern boys were very well liked with some officers down in the South there. And this happened to be a Southern officer, and he says that's insubordination of my route." And And I said, "What the hell, subordination?" I didn't even know what it was. And so he says, "You get your gear packed, you're out of here," And Monday morning, that was the next day. So I had my duffel bag all packed, ready to go, with some other guys that had been got on the list for some reason or other, or just one out, because it was all volunteer. And he was actually doing me a favor, and I didn't know it. My first sergeant come in there. I went down there waiting to get transferred out, and the first sergeant came through there, and he said, "What the hell are you doing here? How come you're not out, on duty?" I said, "Well, I'm going to, I'm being shipped out." He said, "What do you mean shipped out?" I said, "Well, the lieutenant shipped me out. He kicked me out." And then they got the lieutenant and so forth, and they wanted me up for they thought I was gonna be a pretty good guy, and he pleaded my case, but this lieutenant outranked him, and so I got shipped out. That's how that thing happened. It wasn't anything I even didn't do. But here again, later in September, there we're in Nottingham, England. The same thing happened to me. I was AWOL. I got AWOL because of my first sergeant. I was in a hospital outside of Bedford, England, and I went up to Nottingham got a pass, and I went up to Nottingham to see some of my buddies. And the first sergeant saw me, and he says, "Come on, you're going with us." I says, "I'm not out of the hospital yet. I got a pass out of the hospital." And he says, "Go grab a rifle. There's one in the orderly room, blah, blah. You'll know where we're going. And have some of your buddies tell you." He was a sweetheart. He had about much love in his body as a kangaroo. And, so now I'm AWOL from the hospital. They had me AWOL from, I found in my records after I got home, I was AWOL from the hospital. And then about 4 days later, they had me as missing in action. So I never heard anything about it. But I told the sergeant years later, and I said, "Goddamn it, I was AWOL from the hospital, and that damn rifle I got was worn out, and blah, blah, blah." And he was still a sweet old lovable self. He says, "Well, you got home. What you bitching about?"
You mentioned England there. How did you find it when you posted to Britain? Because obviously we've been at war for 4 years. You're really, from our point of view, coming from the land of plenty. What were your impressions of England when you arrive?
Oh, well, my ancestry, Metcalfe, his ancestry, there's a whole town of Metcalfes up by the Scottish border. I'm so happy to be there. And yeah, I had a great time. I made a lot of friends there. And matter of fact, we went back to see them some of those friends 18 years later, in Nottingham, and we had a lot of fun. Other guys had problems, or thought they did. They had a problem, but it wasn't with the Brits. It was with themselves. But I never had any problem. And as a matter of fact, one of my buddies came back and married one of the gals there that he met there in Nottingham. She was a hostess there at one of the USO. I got to know him. I didn't know him. I picked his carcass up in the prison camp. He got shot, so I picked him up, took him to an aid station, and then that's how I got to know him. And then he just died here about 2 years ago, but I hadn't met him. But yeah, and I met the gal, and I saw her, and I says, I had the best cup of coffee there, and I was kidding her. See, I said, the best cup of coffee there at the USO. She says, yeah, and it's the best ever made in England, she says.
Well, we're not necessarily renowned for our coffee. So when you were over here, were you on permanent standby waiting for an operation just to come up? Because I guess this is after D-Day and they didn't quite know what to do with the Airbourne. Did you know what you were going to be in for? Or were you just sort of waiting for a mission?
Well, the thing is, we knew we were going to go back in. There was no doubt about it, because the Army is getting pushed around pretty much, and us macho men, we figured we could do anything, and we found out we couldn't. But yeah, we knew that summer after the guys come back, we prepared for another mission, and then the Field Marshal Montgomery came up with a market garden. It was his course, the story on that, and so we started praying for that, and we were under Montgomery. That was another thing. So being under Montgomery, all our supplies and things that came through, guys never got coffee for 2-3 months.
So did you learn to drink English tea?
Yeah, they had tea running out the Yeah, they almost rebelled.
Now, what amuses me is when the guys have been briefed about Operation Market Garden, the first time you hear about it is from a local girl tells you where your next operation's going to be. How does she know? How did you find out of this girl that you were going to into Holland?
Oh yeah, how could I forget that? And no, the girls there, we make dates for the weekend, and then they said, well, Yank, you're not going to be here. What the hell do you mean we're not going to be here? Well, you're just not going to be here. You're going to be gone. And you guys, we found out from the girls, and they let you know. And we had the girls there were so so lovely, and so and they had a place called Palais de Dance in Nottingham. It was a dance hall there, and we could meet them there. And we made a lot of good friends there. And a lot of guys married the girls. Matter of fact, when we went back to England in 61, and so we went back to see our friends, and so they had moved to Chesterfield, outside of Chesterfield. And so we went down to the constable's office there, and there's some people ahead of us there, and I was waiting, and we were late in line, and so I went up there, and then I told the constable, I said, well, I was wondering where Jeff and Molly Wheeler were. And they lived here just outside of Walton Park there and so forth. And there were a couple of bobbies standing behind us there. And I heard one of them said, he says, oh, yeah. He said to his buddy, he says, I remember those sons of bitches. He said, my sister married one. Well, I didn't say a damn word. I didn't even look around. I didn't like I ever heard him, but he had to set it loud enough so I could hear it, And yeah, he probably did. He probably got a hold of a dude that was, we probably wouldn't have married either.
How much of the Market Garden plan were you aware of when you're told about the mission? Do you only know your part of the mission? Did you know even that you were going to go to Nijmegen?
Yes, we knew. We had sand tables. We had, of course, I didn't see them. The other guys were there. I was in the hospital, but they knew very much where. But they had us locked in the hangars at the airport. You couldn't get out. But all this stuff, information came from inside the hangars, so nobody else could know about it. Yeah, we had maps, we had money, we had everything. Where my patrol was the first patrol in the town, and it was make contact with the Germans, and we ran into them. They just crossed the bridge. It was the forward elements of the 10th Death Head Division. And so we ran into them, the 20 of us, and we had a firefight there. We got a few of the trucks, and they got a few of us, of course. And that was the beginning, actually, of Market Garden. Except they did have information that we were coming, because they had the drop zones zeroed in with 88s and anti-aircraft guns. That wasn't any big secret as we had hoped. We needed the element of surprise, which is it was no surprise. And so we lost a lot of men there. And, of course, you know the story in Arnhem.
Yeah, a bridge too far.
Yeah, a bridge too far. And, we went back over there, and we went into a little town of Burlington in Austria. And in the bridge too far, where the Germans got a hold of the gliders, got a hold of the satchel that had the plans of Market Garden, and this soldier gave it to the officer, and he took it to a model, which was a grandfather of German paratroops. But I was in the picture there, and we ran into this officer. I took him off for lunch, and found out he was a German paratrooper, and he was telling me about it, but he's the one that got the plan from Market Garden.
Wow, that was...
Yeah, but they wouldn't believe me. Yeah. Small world sometimes.
It is, indeed. So how did your jump go when you jumped in? Because in Sicily and D-Day, men were scattered all over the place. And how did your jump go at Nijmegen? Did it go to plan? Did you all land together?
We were scattered quite a bit. We went in at different times of day. We went in with my group. We were the first ones to come in, drop that secure the landing zones, and then the gliders would come in afterwards. And then we'd have some more reinforcements come in with the glider people. So it was on different drop zones, and it was all the same sequence. Was the first you secure the zone, and then the gliders would come in. Matter of fact, we were still running the Germans off our drop zone when the first gliders were landing the next day, in fact. So we were very undermanned. We should have had maybe 4 more divisions dropped in there than just the 2 of us. And of course the Brits had the first Airborne Army there. There's just 3 of us dropped in there. There should have been about 6 divisions. So I think that we were very undermanned. We were out about 6-1, I think. I think they miscalculated the strength in the fight in the Germans at that time. And we just thought they were all beat. Everybody thought they'd be home by Christmas time. But I spent my case. I spent Christmas time in the prison camp. I think, what the hell happened? Somebody boo-boo.
Let's get you to your prison camp. As you said, you get into a firefight in Nijmegen, and that's where you're hit. How were you hit? Were you badly injured?
Yeah, I was hit by an 88. I didn't get the shrapnel in me. I blew out my eardrums, and so I was deaf, most of the time, except I had a little hearing in my left ear. And Still bothers me today, of course. And I was picked up by the Germans. My best buddy rolled me over. The guys rolled me over. There's a lot of blood coming out of my head, and they thought they left me for dead. That's where they got the name for the book, is Left for Dead. And that's where they left me, is that 88 that they're sitting at the circle there, right there at the Kaiser something circle. Yeah, they couldn't take me anywhere because we were still about six miles from our drop zone. So they had to get back to run the Germans off our drop zone. So we had a busy time. I mean, I wasn't a very high priority. I mean, they said, that's one less mouth to feed, so to speak.
And how did the Germans treat you as a prisoner of war? Did you expect to be well treated?
Oh, no, because first of all, we weren't invited guests. And I do have to admit, they run a lousy chain of motels. And Hitler had a bad idea about motels. He should never get into hotel business. Anyway, they ordered the camp executed at the end of the war. My guy I ran into here about 15 years ago was in with the Germans there at the Stalag 7A down in Moosburg outside of Munich. He saw the communications. He was an American flyer that was a doctor, so he was in with the staff there at the Stalag, and this commandant showed him a communique from Berlin sent by Hitler that to execute the camps. The commandant told this guy, and we loved this guy. He says he was an SS colonel, but he did everything he could for us, for what he could do. You know, he couldn't do much, but he did what he could. And they invited him into our barracks when Patton came through and blew off the front gate and stuff like that. But he got shot off the machine gun tower at the front. He stayed up there. He wouldn't come in. But he showed him this, go back to this captain that was the doctor, showed him the communique saying execute me. He says, I've been a soldier all my life, and I've never disobeyed an order. He said, but this one I cannot obey, and that's why we're still here today.
Now, one great story is you are interrogated. Now, were you interrogated by Himmler? What's the story about your interrogation?
Well, like I say, I've got hit by the 88 and the patrol pulled out, and they left me there, right there at the bridge. And the Germans were coming across the bridge, and they picked me up right there, and they took me down into this sunken castle. Now, Charlemagne, in about the 10th century or 12th, somewhere in there, had built a sunken castle there along the Moss Wall River, and that was Heinrich Himmler's headquarters during the war. And he was there when they picked me up, and they waited a while, and some of the officers ran out and grabbed a hold of me, because some guy, when the Germans had a rifle right on my forehead there, and he was yelling, because I guess we killed one of his buddies, and he was hysterical. He batted the rifle away. They took me down into this sunken castle, and then opened the door, and then there's just one little desk there, and it's Heinrich Himmler, and then Himmler did not speak English. He understood a lot more than he let on, I know. Yeah, but he never spoke with me. He had an interpreter with him. And then they had a big map out on the table there, and I had these two big guards on the side of me. And they walked up to the table there, and their desk, and they had Arnhem. Arnhem was encircled in red. Nijmegen was encircled in red. Eindhoven, where the 101st had dropped, that was encircled in red. And they kept asking me how many men dropped in there. And I told them I didn't know. I was just out of the hospital and gave them a sad story, I don't think they felt that sorry for me, though. I think it's, oh shit, here we go. But he did, and they asked me about my colonel, about a couple of captains, and he got him down to the company, guy, the first sergeant even, they asked about, and I said, yeah. He said, they come with you? And I said, well, I guess so. I didn't see him. We don't travel in the same circles, So they figured out this dumb shit. They're not getting much out of him. He doesn't even know where he is, Then they asked her, and Himmler said something to the interpreter, and he said, something. He said, we hadn't had anything to eat yet. And of course, it was a little after midnight. And now I'm hungry in hell. I said, oh, geez, I said to my sister, so I've been pretty busy. I forgot all about, dinner. He said, after the interrogation, we'll give you something. And they did. They gave me about a gallon container of Polish sausage packed in mustard, and then a little tin of orange marmalade. And then there was a kilo of bread, which was a brown bread, about half sawdust and stuff. That was my dinner. So I was sitting in the corner eating that dinner, and that's where we're going to call it dinner with Himmler, and they may make a movie of it. That's what they're going to call it. And so I hear, I mean, I know much about it as you do.
Well, it would be a great title for a movie, Dinner with Himmler. Wonderful Hollywood title. Now, you were also you went to Stalag Luft 3, which is a Luftwaffe camp. Were you there just after the Great Escape had happened?
Now, the story on that is I was in Stalag Luft 3 for about 10 days, and because the German military paratroopers were part of the Air Force. Now, the American military paratroopers are part of the infantry, part of the Army. And so the Germans thought we were Air Force, so they took us there. Air Force camps were actually country clubs compared to labor camps and stuff like that. There's no night and day, simply because Hermann Göring was Air Force, and he saw to it that the Air Force personnel were all segregated. They were Air Force, and so that's why the camps. One was under the Army, the other was, I guess, he took the Air Force. So anyway, they were country clubs, and then this goddamn colonel Spivey, he told the Germans that we were infantry, we weren't Air Force. So then they took us out and took us to the Stalag 7A in Moosburg, which is a labor camp. And we all swore we'd really get this guy, But he died. He died several years ago.
As a prisoner of war, when you were liberated from the camp, or when the camp was liberated, how did they plan on getting you back?
They were flying us in. Flying in Dakotas into the area to take us out the next day. They didn't want our bodies running around on the loose there. It was mayhem. There wasn't any organization. Everything was just wide open, Matter of fact, I met a buddy in town. I was feeling pretty good. I got into some wine, and I'm laying in the street there in Moosburg, this town. Tanks were going by, throwing off cigarettes to you, and my buddy from my high school came by, and he recognized me. Of course, I had a beard and a lot lighter, and so he was lost, and he was a runner between. He'd been there about a week. He was lost. He didn't know where his platoon was. He was with a black platoon, and at that time, everything was segregated. They didn't have any black soldiers other than the guys, dock workers, and driving the trucks and stuff. But anyway, they'd been segregated, and he was trying to find those. Well, he had an M1 rifle, and there's no law there, nothing. I mean, the guys are just going through, and I said, well, we'll spend the night. We'll find your guys tomorrow. He said, where are we staying? I said, well, that house back is off the long driveway there. And he said, you know those people? I said, no, you got the M1 rifle. And we did. We did. We spent the night with them, and the guy happened to be a music teacher there, and he played the minute waltz, for us on the piano, and we brought in a lot of food from the tankers and the guys who came by and threw it, dropped it off. And of course, we couldn't eat. I couldn't eat any of it because my stomach was, so small. Anyway, and but then the next morning we'd go out and they were crying, and it was another story. I'm leaving out a lot of such. And they gave me a big silver stein, two quart silver stein, and a beautiful thing filled with fresh eggs, And we made made some friends with it. But the next door neighbor was not. I don't think we made a friend there because I took his car. I said, "You'll find your car in Paris." Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I knew I would never have a chance to do things I was doing then, and so I did them. I may have been sorry for it, but it wasn't because I didn't do it, I mean, I liberated Opel, German Opel, after I got liberated. I drove to Paris and I met this doctor, where I meet a lot of my friends. I mean, it's questionable. I met him in the Munich jail. And he was a French doctor. Laborde lived in Paris, and they dragged him in there one night. And, we got to talking. There's 2 Russian soldiers in the cell with me there. And he said, "You come to Paris, I'll show you Paris." So I said, okay. And this was about a month or so left in the war. So I did. I hot wired a Opel, and a buddy of mine, we headed for Paris, and we stopped all the GI trucks. The guys were in convoys, and hey, we need some gas. They throw you a couple jerry cans off the 5-gallon cans. So we never spent a penny for gas. Got to Paris, and we spent about a couple of weeks there with Laborde showing us Paris. We finally got home. I sold the Opel to the Air Force captain. He drove it about a block, and the MPs took it away from him. So, I mean, it broke my heart,
It amazed me that you could move about kind of almost without impunity, so far from in Germany all the way to Paris, without anyone picking you up or really stopping to question you, and you somehow getting back into the army system. It's amazing that you could sort of move about without, the MPs stopping you. And
the thing that I did, I put a little sticker along on the side of my windshield, and I made it look very official. It was the Colonel Lindquist staff car, so forth. But you're right, they did. I mean, I wasn't the only guy with the idea of getting a car and going. I mean, about every guy and his brother got the idea, and we went into Munich, and I saw all these cars parked alongside the road there going in there, and MPs were directing traffic. Well, they've been taking cars away from these guys, and it kept. And I had this buddy with me, and I said, "Oh, geez, we're not going to get to Paris now if we can't get around these guys." And they had us boxed in, and then they pointed to us to go down to the corner, turn right, and then there's another MP on the next corner, turn this way. Well, I was going between the 2 MPs. About halfway through the block, there's a railroad track going through there. So I swung down a railroad track and you hit out in some guy's garage till dark, and then we got out of Munich, and then we did get to Paris. But otherwise they were confiscating cars. Yeah, because like I said, there were so many of them there that they want to get us out of there and get us home before we got into trouble,
Now, after all your adventures, now you could have been flown home after your camp's liberated, but you choose to avoid it. As you say, you steal the Opel. How, if you're AWOL, and you've missed being repatriated back, how did you get back to the US when you decided you'd had enough of your trip around Europe in your Opel?
Okay. That's funny too. Everything that seems to be adventure. We got to Paris, and sold the car. So now we didn't have a car. We saw Laborde, we saw Paris, and so forth. So I sent a Western Union telegram home. Said, "I'll see you guys sometime," to my parents. I'll see you guys sometime this summer, and that was it. So we were running around there, and the MPs picked us up and took us to this colonel who was bucking for general. He says, "Where's your passes?" We didn't have passes. We had German POW tags, but they never asked for them. He says, he says, you really cussed us out. I mean, I don't want to repeat what he said. I mean, it was so foul. He says, "You guys are going to Le Havre, with Camp Lucky Strike," and it was called Camp Lucky Strike. He says, "You guys, we're putting you on a boat, you're leaving, and he was shooting us out for AWOL, and he said, well, then we pulled out our dog tag, and he really blew his cork, He said, "You son of a bitch," he says, "guys, get you home and get you out of here, blah, blah." He had no sympathy for us, and so then what he does, he gives us showers and the shaves and cleaned us up real good and gave us a partial pay, which we already had money. He says, "You be here at the trucks tomorrow morning. We're taking you to Le Havre. Wait for your Liberty ship." Okay, so 8 o'clock comes, we're not there. We're out someplace having a ball. And they pick us up again. They drag us into the same guy, and he says, "Where were you at 8 o'clock?" "Oh, was that 3 days ago?" He says, "You are staying here," and he got a couple of guards, and we were under guards all the way to Le Havre. Where we got on the boat. That's how we got on the Liberty ship. It took us about 14 days to get to Rhode Island, and then I got off the boat. They took me up to this one fort, and it was near my home, and then I hitchhiked home and walked in the kitchen, and my mom was in the kitchen, and I says, "Hey, Mom, what's up?" and then there wasn't any GED tests in those days, and then I went back to high school. And I enrolled in an algebra class with this professor and stuff. I told the professor after 3 years now, I says, "Mr. Hoppy," I says, "I'm ready to do my homework now." So I did. I was finished out high school, and I went on to school, and I went out to work for Disney, and went out in California, and then finished school. Quit there, finished school, went into teaching. So I was taught school for about 20 years, and then went into a business up in Wyoming, went into ranching business. I was out feeding cows one morning, 65 below. This is up near the Yellowstone Park country. Yeah. So I said, "Well, a little crap on that stuff." So we moved down to Arizona. So that's where we are today. We're up in the mountains. This is about 80 degrees today, and it's not 65 below anymore. But we are retired. I'm still playing softball, and we're enjoying life. I got one story for you before I leave, and it's to do with the Brits. Now, we had a British compound, we had a Russian compound, and then the British compound. It was down on the other side. So one evening they invited us to see one of their plays that they were putting on. I think it was in the book, I'm not sure. And so, so some of those guys we crowded on them, we had more guards, guys, all around the wall. And now these guys put on a play. It was called Barrett's of Whimple Street. And I'll never forget it. I never saw the play, but I was intended to see it. And so Mama comes out, beforehand, and we haven't seen a gal in 8 months, and she comes out there. She looked pretty good, I got to admit. And the guy's a cat calls and whistles, and she told him to shut up. She told us to shut up, and she introduced. Daughter comes out first, and then she comes out and introduced one of her 3 daughters. And boy, she really looked good. And the guys really were going wild, and the Germans wondering what the hell's going on, everybody's whistling and jumping up down. There's nothing going on. They didn't understand what the whole story was about here. And it was all about sex, or we thought it was. She just banged down that. She made the big curtain and it banged down, and then she comes out and she says, "All right, Yanks, you guys behave yourselves." She says, "We're not going to tolerate this, So everybody shut up. So then she introduced the second daughter. We never did see the third daughter because it was preceded by the first daughter. The same thing, catcalls, whistles, and all this. And then she was really ticked off. I'll tell you, she was mad. Boy, the curtain comes down and lights come on. Guards are standing around, they're looking at each other, you know. And she got out there and all she said was, "All right, Yank, go home." Never saw the play, but I've always, I got a little bit of the story of it, but I'll never forget that time. Then she told the Germans to get our ass out of there right now.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Gene. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. Folks, if you're looking for a wartime memoir, you can't go far wrong with Gene's. The book is Left for Dead at Nijmegen. It's written by Marcus Nannini. It is superb. Certainly one of the best memoirs I've read. I'll put a link on the website, www.podcast.com. Now, before I go, I was looking at the data Patreon provides, and I thought I'd give a shout out to Chris K. Now, Chris was my first patron, and for 5 months, my only patron. And he's still with me after all this time. So thank you, Chris. But not just Chris, but to everyone who supported the show. It really does help me put the time aside to produce the podcast. If you're not already a patron, you can find out more at patreon.com/WW2podcasts. That's all from me. I'm Angus Wallace, and thanks for listening.